how everything, how the mix is. It's early in the morning for this stuff. Cool. That didn't work out so great. Enough of that. How are you guys doing this morning? I've been like, I recorded that pedal board video that I did this week, and like everything got kind of like changed and torn apart, and then I'm missing a camera mount. Well, but I'm missing a camera mount. I've got it sitting here. I just didn't have time to put all that back together, so I'm kind of, everything's in a weird place today, so forgive me. I figured we would talk a bit about building seventh chords, all the different varieties of 4-note chords today, and then let's have some brainstorm before Saturday or before next Wednesday. We'll probably be done with this particular fretboard series. So I want to play something else. How about another one of the other backing tracks? mess. All right. Mark says there's some extra ground hum. What if we just got rid of that microphone? So you're hearing me on my vocal mic still, right? You guys hearing that? You can still hear the guitar. There's going to be some hum because that pedal's pretty high gain. That's that J-Rocket the Dude. Actually, maybe I should. You can hear me. Is that okay? Nothing like live engineering your stuff on the fly. If I brought the amp back in. All right, so let's talk about chords for a second. One thing that I like to do is kind of talk about the fact that, you know, when we talk about harmonizing something, harmonizing comes from playing more than one note at the same time, right? So if I was to, actually we'll do this. One of these is the right, there we go. Enough with the vocal is quiet. Can you hear me now okay? Sorry guys, I kind of messed this up apparently today. Let me make sure I've got the proper audio. Duet USB, yeah, it's there. All right, just kind of keep letting me know if things work or if things don't work. All right, so, you know, we tend to do these things in the key of C. And even though I know most guitar players who tend to watch my videos aren't big music readers, because most of us as guitar players just aren't, it's kind of easy to demonstrate some of this stuff on the written page. Now, when we talk about, oh, the guitar was really loud. Ah, interesting. When we talk about melody versus harmony, melody is basically when you're playing stuff one note at a time. All right, and harmony is where you're playing notes, and you could think of it in two dimensions, right? So we've got this idea where, you know, time flows this direction in music, right? And this is melody. All right, and then in this direction going up on the staff, this is harmony. So when we play, you know, two notes together, say I've got this F, and then I've got an A right there, that's a harmonization, right? So I get the feeling most of you guys are familiar. We can back this up. All right, so if I play C, D, E just by themselves, right, that's a melody. All right, if I play C and E together, I'm playing the first string open and doing what we talked about in the triads lesson is stacking thirds, and I continue this up with these three notes, right, because this guy is C, this is D, and then this is E right here. Whoops. This is what happens when people like me get a hold of digital writing devices. When you play them and there's one note on top of another note, they're playing at the same time, then that's a harmonized note, right? So we've got a melody, and then we've got the harmonized melody. All right. It's amazing, like, sometimes I don't get students that really understand the difference between those two things. Now, we can continue to harmonize this, and when we built the triads, we did it this way. We just kept stacking thirds, or every other note. And because we're doing these all from the same scale, they were all in the same key. And I'm not going to totally redo the triads lesson, but if you remember, right, the first chord, the fourth chord, and the fifth chord were all major, and we use capital numbers for those, right? And then the second chord, third, and sixth are minor, and then the seventh chord is a diminished triad, right? Now this becomes important when we talk about seventh chords, because this is part of the identity of the seventh chords that we're going to play, right? So here we got D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and then B diminished, and that's what that circle is, right? So, and if we remember from before, like if we're doing C major, we could blow this up a bit here. Oops. Can I make this thinner? Yes, I can. All right, so I'm going to build this triad here. All right, and stacked like this, we've got the lowest note is the root, there's the third, and then there's the fifth. All right, and it's major third and perfect fifth. All right. When we did this to make it a minor chord, all right, so this is we lowered the third. Now, I know you guys are like, man, we did this a couple weeks ago. Why are we doing this? And I'm doing this partially, if you weren't here last time, and partially because it's important for the explanation of why we have these different chords. So for this chord, which is a C minor, you got a root, minor 3, and a perfect 5. All right, so the third is down a half step, right? And because it sounds different, right, the distances between the notes are different, we get a different sound. So that's C minor. So yeah, Tom, so you bring, you know, for most of us who have learned music, you know, either on our own or, you know, taking basic piano lessons or, you know, guitar lessons in the back of a guitar shop, you know, anyone who's not been through a formal music education, sometimes the definitions of these concepts kind of go in the cracks and we think we understand them. But it's kind of cool to like basically go back through these ideas when we do lessons like this, just as a refresher. It's always good to backfill a little bit. If you find that there's a phrase that I use or a term that I use in something like this that you don't understand, please let me know. Please ask, because then I can continue to define or explore that for you. All right, so out of the remaining, we've got C diminished. Man, I'm sorry for you guys having to read this. And then C augmented. All right, and I'll just kind of go through those fairly quickly. We should remember at this point. So a C diminished, we lower the third and the fifth, and then a C augmented, we have a major third and we raise the fifth. All right, and then in our description, we've got root, minor 3, and then diminished 5. God, I can't even read my own writing. And then for augmented, we've got root, major 3, and augmented 5. All right. Okay. So Mark brings up a good question here. So the difference between major and perfect, and this is this is always one of those things, even like in college classes, right? We have certain intervals, and I think it probably has to do a little bit with the harmonic overtone series, but the root and its octave are considered perfect intervals, and the fifth and the fourth, they're very open clear, plain sounds. The second, third, sixth, and seventh are considered the major minor intervals, and I think it has to do with the amount of consonance or dissonance there is in the sound of the interval. This is one of those things that I've even after going back to music school for a second time, every time a teacher explained why there are perfect intervals, they all had different explanations. So that's the first thing is at this point, remember that 2, 3, 6, and 7 are major, minor, and then the root, octave, 4, and 5 are diminished. But here's the thing to consider. There's this great graphic that someone once wrote, and I'm going to recreate it for you here. All right, so if you have a major interval, whoops. All right, if you lower that note in that interval, it becomes minor. All right, we know that right now. If we have a perfect interval, if you lower it, it becomes diminished. And if you raise it, it becomes augmented. But within the realms of, I'll bring your other question here. This major minor thing, you can still lower a minor interval and it becomes diminished. And you can still raise a major interval and make it augmented. Now this stuff is important when you're analyzing, 20th century art music or if in the realm of what we do here, right, I say C to E, that's a major third. If I go C to E flat, that's a minor third because the distance is there. If I go C to D, well, that's a major second, right? But theoretically, this could also be, D could also be E double flat, which would make it a diminished third, right? Now, functionally, that makes no sense in the real world. But theoretically, it's possible because of things that we do. We'll call it art music because classical music is a bad term. And same thing with an augmented third. An augmented third would be the same note as a perfect fourth. So functionally, it works that way. It just has to do with how you write it out. All right. So when we say a sharp 5, right, we're referring to augmented. If we say flat 5, diminished. Right? If we say sharp 4, that's also an augmented fourth. There's no such thing as a diminished fourth because that would just be a major third. Right? And then we typically don't go augmented octaves and augmented unisons because, once again, that stuff makes no sense in the context of what we're doing. There's the theoretical world with this, and then there's the how are we actually going to use this stuff? What do we need to understand with this? And the reality is that a lot of the stuff that's written here, it exists in the theoretical world, and it exists in styles of music that most of us are never going to play on our guitar. And if we are, then we're probably getting a different kind of education than what I'm giving you live on the internet. So that's that. Okay, so let me go back to, whoops, this guy here. So we have these triads, right? And from those triads, we can stack sevenths on top of them. So I'm going to start with the major. So if I go C major, and I just stack a third on top, right? So I've got, in this case, root. I'm going to put MAJ for 3. Perfect 5. And now we're going to have actually, you can't really read this like this. Dang it. I'll put it up here for this one. So you're going to have a root, major third, perfect 5, and then a major 7, right? And that's that sound. And that is literally just using the notes out of a C major scale. All right, that's when we stack all the notes off of the first note in the major scale in thirds, and that's what we get. And you can continue on. You can add a ninth. You know, if you add the 6th, it becomes a 13. You can add the 11. We're not getting into that, right? We're just talking because when you get up to the 7th, these are all basically functional parts of the chord. When you get up to the 9th and the 11th and the 13th, for the most part, those are color notes for how we're going to use them. Now, the second one of these triads, and this is C major 7. We're going to just do good old C7, which is also C dominant 7. So we're going to stack our thirds, because no matter what we do, we're still stacking these thirds. But we're going to have a major triad, and we're going to lower the 7th. All right, and this occurs naturally off of the 5 chord, the major triad that's a 5 chord in a major key. All right, so we have root, major third, perfect 5th, so it's just a major triad at that point, but then minor 7, right? Because we've lowered that B, it's now a B flat. So whenever you see something that says C7, that's a C dominant 7, and it's a major triad with a minor 7 on top. All right, so all of this stuff is the same between these two chords, right? And it's just the note at the very top that's changing, that changes the identity and the function of this kind of 7th chord. All right, does this make sense? I'm gonna pause just for a second, let you guys digest. But that's the difference between a major 7 and a dominant 7. It's the same triad, the same first 3 notes. It's the 4th note that changes. And we're going to talk about how these fall in the major scale and in a minor scale in a little bit. All right, so what if we take a minor triad so remember C, E flat, and G. All right, so we have root, whoops. Minor 3 and perfect 5. All right, now typically you're going to end up having a minor 7 on top of this, and I'll show why here in a second. Whoops. And it's mainly because this is how it falls in most keys. So we got C, E, C, E flat, G. Let me, you get a kick out of this. All right. So I've got C, E flat, G, and then there's the B flat there. All right. If I did a major triad, it's C, E, and G. There's the major 7. Dominant, same thing with the minor 7. You can't really see what I'm doing here. All right, and if I was to lower the 3rd and then put the minor 7, that's a minor 7 chord. All right, you can have a minor major 7 chord here. Very mysterious sounding, not very commonly occurring in most of the music that you play. But you know, if you play, all right, that's the second chord of Stairway to Heaven, or any of these things where we've got, is that Michelle by the Beatles? There's a million of these where there's a descending line, and against a minor chord, the second chord would end up being this minor chord with a major 7. But that's very tense. It's almost like just playing an E7 right there. It's got that energy where it wants to move. All right, so diatonically, this is going to be kind of our minor 7 chord, our C minor 7. You also see CM7 or CMI7. On jazz charts, you'll also see it as C with a minus and a 7. Okay. After that, the next note that we can lower is the 5th, right? Because we've done major triads, minor triads. We're not going to get too far into the minor triad thing because after this, most of the changes are not 7th chords. All right, so we've got root, minor 3rd, diminished 5th, and then minor 7, right? So root, minor 3, diminished 5th, or flat 5, and then minor 7. All right, and this chord is quite literally called a C minor 7 flat 5, and we don't really write it that way. We usually go C and then minor 7, and then we'll put the flat 5 here. And then the other word for this, because your bass triad, this part here, is a diminished triad, is that this is also called C half diminished, or you'll see it with C and then a circle with a slash. There's a lot of names for this chord, and typically it's the 7th chord in a major key, it's the 2 chord in a minor key, right? And that's the one thing you can do with the diminished triad in diatonic harmony. Now you're saying, if that's half diminished, what is fully diminished? And fully diminished takes your diminished triad. So you got root, minor 3rd, flat 5. And then, remember I was saying we can have diminished 7ths? We could do it one of 2 ways. We can say B double flat. All right, so root, minor 3, diminished 7, and I'm sorry, diminished 5. I'm getting ahead of myself. And then diminished 7. Or the one that makes most sense to most people is just to do root, minor 3rd, diminished 5, and major 6. Because these 2 notes are the same pitch. All right, we've just taken the 7th, which is B, and we've made it minor, which lowers it to B flat. And then if we go B double flat, we've actually just lowered it to what we also know as A. So might as well just call it the 6th. Okay, pause for a second. Question time. What we've done is we've gone through the majority of just the 7th chords. Really almost all of the 7th chords except for the augmented one. Which, all right, let me just do that real quick. Just to have it here on the page. All right. So these are all full. Or C with a circle, or just C dim. You know, you'll see it a bunch of ways, but if you're doing it this way, this is how it's going to work. All right, and then the last one of these, if we take the augmented triad, all right, we've got root, major 3, and then augmented 5, that's the G sharp. And then if we have a minor 7, right, which would be the B flat, This guy would be called C7 sharp 5. It's an augmented 7th chord. If we were to, you could go, you could make it a major 7th, and then that would give you this chord. It's funny, I can grab it quicker than I can think about it. It's so rare that I play this chord. All right, so in this case, this guy's root, major 3, augmented 5th, and then major 7. Yeah, apparently someone must have come on the porch and delivered something. But anyway, this chord is also not as common, right? And what's funny is that we can take a look at this right here, and that is just an E major triad. And later on, we'll talk about slash chords, where you're basically going to play, like we'll say, hey, this is an E over C, which means it's an E major over a C bass. All right, E minor over C would be, actually, let me demonstrate this real quick. So this is what I'm playing, right? So like E major, there's a major triad right there. That's the E, and then that note is the C. Right, if I was to make it E minor, right, that actually gives us the notes that make up a C major 7 chord, E minor over C, right? Because the E minor, the E is the 3rd of the C, the B is the 7th of the C, the G is the 5th of the C, and then the C in the bass. All right, so it's later on we can talk about like smaller chords that we can put over bass notes. So like I can play this while someone's going. I just play that E minor, and you're going to hear that major 7 chord sound, because in the harmony, in the vertical, when we're talking about this right here, you're going to hear all of this together. And this is how like when you're playing in an orchestra or you're playing in a big band, you know, say you've got 5 saxophones and everyone's playing one note, you're still outlining the chord, because one guy's going to play the root, another guy's going to play the 3rd, another guy's going to play the 5th, and it's going to play the 7th or the 9th, right? So you end up having all these notes existing in the same space together. They're not being played on the same instrument, but they're being played at the same time, so that in the vertical sound, we still get this stacked chord thing going on here, right? Now, what that also means is you can play partial or rootless chords once you learn this stuff with the triads, right? Because I can go through here and go, hey, look, this guy here, I know that this is E minor. You guys might not know this yet, so don't worry, right? So I can play E minor, and the bass player's playing the C major root, and then suddenly I've got C major 7, all right? This one right here, this is actually E diminished, right? So I can go, and that actually gives me a dominant 7th chord, all right? This one right here, I'm just talking about the 4 notes above the C. This is E flat major, right? So here's E flat major, there's the C, and now I've got a C minor 7 chord. All right, that's another lesson. I think we'll get into that later on, because I think we can spend a good hour or so just kind of talking about how that works. But what's nice is, because these are all thirds stacked on top of each other, we can actually just take parts of this stack of notes and, you know, and consider it a triad and play them together while someone else is playing something else, and we get that full harmony. Okay, so that's all of the construction part of it. Now what we need to do is we need to talk about how we harmonize a major key, and then how do we play it here. So if I was to go back to our first thing here, and let's drop the 7ths on all of these guys here. what happens is that the 1 chord becomes a major 7, which we talked about already. And so does the 4 chord. All right, the 2 chord, 3 chord, and 7 chord, or 6 chord, are all minor 7 chords because you have a minor triad, and then the note that we add ends up being a minor 7th to the note that we're starting on. All right. This guy here, though, the 5 chord becomes, that's the only naturally occurring dominant chord. All right, so we end up having it takes a sec for this. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G dominant 7, A minor 7, B half diminished or minor 7 flat 5, and then back to the C major 7. You guys ever watch The Office? This just sounds like the song the ad. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, so that's what naturally occurs in a major key. So like if I'm playing, 1, 4, 5, that was going to make it major or 7th chords. C major 7, F major 7, and then G dominant 7. That dominant 7 actually has a little function that helps music resolve, right? If I'm playing a G7, oops. So I'm going to have these notes, and ultimately it's going to want to resolve to a C major. Oops. All right, so C major is here. C, E, G, oops. This all looks like garbage. C, E, G, and then there's the B right there. Actually, won't even worry about the B. All right, a G7 has G, B, D, and F. Now, I think in previous lessons I've talked about the fact that any note that's a half step away from a chord tone wants to resolve to a chord tone. All right, so what happens is that this F right here, we're going to stick it here. That guy wants to resolve down to the E. And this B right here, the 3rd, he wants to resolve up to the root. Right? So you have these two notes, B and F, and their function in life is to create this resolution. It voice leads into the 1 chord. All right, and that's typically what a dominant chord is supposed to do functionally. All right, when I'm in, when you're in music school, there's a lot of this sort of thing, right? You've got with voice leading, you do this when you're singing harmonies, or even like when we're talking about, voicing chords. You want the smoothest movement between notes, right? So both chords have G. Right? And then this guy has a D right here. So what typically happens, like I can say, B, D. Well, it's much easier on a piano. But basically the important notes, they're going to want to resolve. So the B wants to go to the C, the F wants to go down to the D. So you get that. Even like, you hear that wants to resolve. All right. The G can either stay there, or the G can resolve down the 5th. All right. That is one reason why most like rock and roll songs and most harmony in popular music, if it's in a major key, is going to be based around 1, 4, and 5. Those are the major chords. the movement between the 5 root to the 1 or from the 4 to the 1, that's the biggest root movement you have. It's a very strong sound. If I were to go the 2 chord down to the C, that's not very strong. That doesn't feel very resolved, but I'm done, or even better, with the 7th chord, then you have the additional push or tension towards resolving to the 1 chord. All right, so, oops. As far as harmony goes, these chords have a certain amount of function in the music that you play. Now, you say, hey, when I play a blues, every chord is the dominant 7th chord. And that's true. We have what we call non-resolving dominance. And that idea is from, you know, the end of Beethoven's career. He started this idea in the Romantic period and everything else in classical or Western art music. They started saying, hey, that 5 chord doesn't have to resolve to the 1, but it sure does feel good. So eventually we do end up having some sort of resolution like that. As far as soloing goes, I've always talked about the fact that whatever you play is really just an application of tension that gets resolved, right? Something has energy and we want it to come to rest. And that's exactly what happens with chord progressions. And these 7th chord, like if we're just playing triads, it's kind of there, but not quite the same way. As soon as you get those 7ths in there, or that wants to resolve, that's what we're aiming for. And even if I were to be soloing over something, you know, like if I'm playing over a blues, I'm playing over like a C blues. That note right there, that's the B flat, that's the minor 7. So I've been playing this C major pentatonic idea, or even like a C6 chord. And in that last bar before it goes to the 4 chord, I'm hitting that minor 7, which makes this a C dominant chord real obviously. Because the reality is that C is the 5 chord relative to F, which is the 4 chord in this key, right? You can treat anything like a 5 chord for it to resolve. And then you feel that resolution right there. So let me pull up a blues and I'll kind of demonstrate that. I'll do this here in A because I got. Feel that resolution? There is the dominant, and then it leads into the 4 chord. So that's an application of using that dominant sound in a universe where everything's already dominant and causing it to kind of push the music into the 4 chord or into another key. Okay? You guys have any questions? Yes, no, maybe so? This is a little bit of a dry lesson because we're literally just talking theory. But what happens here is that once you understand this, it's also easier to solo over these chords because you understand what notes work and what notes don't, and then what notes have the energy to kind of push your line forward, as well as you're being able to comp or accompany other people. All right, so let's talk about chord voicings. Now, the way we stack stuff on a piano, where you can just do it all in a row and make real easy chord voicings, doesn't work on guitar, right? You know, I kind of demonstrated that this would be a C major 7. You can kind of do it on these strings, C major 7, C7, but they also don't sound very good. There's C minor 7. If I was to, whoops, do like, we'll do this in G, so this I'll all fits on the pin. Well, all right, we'll do this in C to start with here, right? So if I was to do a major chord, root 5, here's the root 3 and 5, right? This is typical, like in this shape, that's a major chord, right? We're actually gonna not do this guy here, but we will put our 7th here. Right, let's get rid of that, right? So actually I'll make this a little bit larger here. Root 5, 3. All right, so that's this guy right here. That's a major 7. If I wanted to, the easy thing is I want to make it a dominant 7. This note here, the 7th, can just be taken away. I can just bar my first finger there. We'll get to that when we get to the dominant chord. All right, so this is C major 7, and it is also the 1 chord. All right, the 2 chord, it's going to be D minor 7. We're going to come here, we've got root 5, here's the minor 3. Oops. And 5, and then the 7th that we need is going to be here. All right, and we're barring across there. All right. So that's our 2 chord. So we got C major, D minor, and then we move this guy up 1 fret, 3 chord is E minor, 7. All right, so we got a similar shape here. We got the root 5, minor 3. There's the 5. Toss our 7 right here, just so we're keeping track of what's going on there. Remember that we're barring this guy right there. The 4 chord is another major 7, just like the 1 chord. It's F major 7. And so here's F, there's the 5, there's the 3, there's the 5, and we've got our major 7 right there. And yes, we are still, actually we don't need to bar on this one. All right, so we've got C major, D minor, E minor, F major. Our 5 chord is going to be just G7. So there's root 5, 3, 5, and then we have a minor 7 here. I should actually make sure we say minor 7 in all of these. All right, and keeping track of this becomes important because it also helps you identify this once we start soloing too. All right, and this guy, in order to get that, just like the minor chords, that's barred right there. So that's the G7. Okay, we'll use this guy here. If I wanted to, we need the 6th chord, which is going to be A minor 7, A, 5, minor 3, 5, minor 7. Oops. We have our bar. Let me go back for a second. Oops. I just hit minor 3rd. Okay. Right, and then this last chord here, I'm going to actually do our 7th chord, our half diminished here. Minor 7, flat 5, or here. So you've got, that's your root. This is your diminished 5. Here's your minor third. And then we're going to have our minor 7 here. Now the cool thing about this half diminished chord voicing is that also if you put the root, remember we're talking about the fact that all these chords, you know, if you put another note underneath them, it changes the context, right? So this B half diminished, if you make G the root, this actually is the top part of a G9 chord. And we use this playing blues all the time. It's a really useful chord shape. Okay, so that's actually just kind of harmonizing C major going up. We can also do this up here in 7th chords. Now, if you have the root on the 6th string, and this is kind of an important thing to think about. You know, how many times have you like wondered, you know, why did Jimi Hendrix play with his thumb over the top of the neck? All right. Partially because if you play this chord, see how thick that is? And then if you've got a Marshall amp cranked up, the sound of that power chord with everything else on top of it is just way too thick sounding. There's just too much going on because the notes and the bass are closer together and there's a lot of harmonic overtones that tend to clash. Right, so what we do is we take, we get rid of the 5th here. So you got this major triad, and then you got your bass note, and then this distance here actually cleans up the sound a bunch. Let me check my tuning real quick. Man, I think all my guitars need to go see a guitar doctor. All right, so if we take this idea where we've got this cleaner sound, and they do this in piano too, they call them drop 2 chords or drop 3 chords, where you take one note out of a chord voicing and you move it around to kind of clean up the sound of the chord voicing. All right, what I just did here, I'll start down here. Is I went root, 3, and then 5. All right, and there's no note on the 5th string. So this guy here is just C major. If we want to make the C major 7, or just a, well, we'll make it major. You can go root. Actually, let's not confuse you. 7, 3, and then 5. All right, so instead of playing the 3 down here, we moved it up an octave. And if you move it up an octave, it clears out this space here and gives you, instead of this sound, which you could go, that is a sound, but it's really thick sounding, and when you're playing with other instruments, it just makes mud. So we take that note, we move it up an octave. We have this much cleaner sounding major 7 chord. Right, this gives us major 7. And then if we just kind of continue with the whole formula here, root, we lower the 7, minor 7, 3 and 5. This gives us just a dominant 7. If we lower, oops, let me move up 1 fret so this is clear. Root, minor 7, minor 3 and 5. Right, this gives us a minor 7 chord. All right, and then this last one here, for right now, root, minor 7, minor 3, and then flat 5. Let me kind of do this to separate these guys out. Yeah, this guy here is that half diminished. It's minor 7, whoops, with the flat 5. Right, so within this, you know, this idea here for chord voicings, Okay, hey, just a second, Mark. You got major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, minor 7, flat 5. I can even take like that major 7 and we raise the 5th. That's that major 7 sharp 5 or augmented. And then we also have dominant 7 and we can raise the 5th. Then we get the 7 sharp 5. So if I was to do this in notation, those chords would look like this. Be C, C, E, G, right? That's the major. C. Then we've got B flat, E, and G. Right, so major, major, 7, root, and then oh, no, hang on a second. Get rid of that. That's the major 7. My brain was getting ahead of myself here. All right, and then if we lower the 7 there, then this is dominant 7th. If we go root, minor 7, lower the 3rd, and then that becomes a minor 7. And then, oops, root, minor 7, minor 3rd, diminished 5th, this becomes 7, flat 5, or half diminished. All right, so you can kind of see the progression of this even on paper. Those are the chords I just played. And if I do it here, C major, C major 7, C dominant 7, C minor 7, and then C minor 7, flat 5. All right. So then you've got the ability on roots on the 5th string, root on the 6th string. I can play C major here, and that'll work. I also play it here. And honestly, you could take this and just move it up. Oh, my brain is just shot. You play that, that's the same as this. But for right now, we're going to do these just so that we have. So we've got C major 7. And I can go like a really common jazz chord progression. Where's the... Hang on a second. Sorry. As I can go 1, 6, 2, 5, and then 1. And in the key of D, this would be C, A minor 7, D minor 7, G 7, and then C. All right, so as an example, you know, if I had to, let me back up a second so I get a whole neck here. I could go, oh, come on, camera, get unwashed out. I go, 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Thank you, Charles. All right, that's not very convenient. And thanks, Mark. All right, and I can also go 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. That's very parallel. It really sucks for voice leading because the notes are jumping all over the place. I could go though 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. It's all kind of in the same area of the neck. It's not perfect for voice leading. I can actually do this smoother. Or I can do up here 1, 6, 2, 5, and then 1. Kind of sucks in that position, right? But you've got these different chords. Now, let's back up for a second because some of these chords really suck. If I really wanted to give you a decent set of comping chords, we could also do, let's do, here's a dominant 7. Right here. All right, so this is basically your old C7 cowboy chord or credence chord, but that works too. So I could go 1, 6, 2, 5, cowboy chord 5, and then to 1. And this actually gives us, remember I was talking about leading tones where the resolution happens? This chord voicing gives us that, and then the root at the top is a G, and that's the 5th of the C chord. So this top part actually super smooth. You could sing that with 3 voices, and that would actually resolve very nicely. And the person at the top would be happy because they're only singing 1 note. They're not having to jump, you know. All right. This making sense, guys? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. Another addition. Let me just. All right, we could also take this root 3 minor 7, and to make it practical, we put the 9 there. And that's where this chord comes from if we're doing that kind of playing. So you've got the dominant 7 chord, that's a dominant 9 chord. We haven't talked about 9 chords. We're not really going to get into it too much other than the fact that this is just a useful chord. So even I can go, you know, 1, oh actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. But 1, 1, 6, 2, 5 with the 9, and there it's a little bit prettier sounding. All right, let's take a little pause, and I'm going to leave this open for you guys to ask questions. I just crammed a whole lot of music at you guys without really having much application. And I almost kind of feel like it would help if we had examples to play beyond, you know, me just throwing out a couple chord voicings. But, you know, with what I've given you here with these chords, roots on the 5th string, and these are not the hippest chord voicings, but they'll get you through, right? And then the note roots on the 6th string, oops. Oh, hard to play there. For Faz, you know, you could play a simple jazz standard tune, like a American songbook kind of tune, you know. All of me, won't you take all of me? Can't you see we're no good together? Take these arms, they'll never. I don't remember the words. There's your D7, D minor 7. This 2/5 chord going to the 5 chord. Blah 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 blah. All right, so you've got a really functional chord vocabulary right off the bat for playing anything like that. All right, as you get into more sophisticated kinds of music, it's really just us manipulating that and adding notes on top. 9ths, 11th chords have a little bit of a kind of a thing to them that we'd have to explore. 13th chords are handy, especially dominant 13th chords. You know, we use them in funk a lot. So I think that is that with the 7th chords for right now. No problem, Tom. I'm glad you dug it. I feel like this is gonna be one of those lessons that people. I think it's very chock full of useful information. I also think a lot of people probably won't spend the time with it. But it's actually, you know, sitting here explaining this to you guys, I kind of came up with maybe some different ways of teaching it. There may end up being like regular video lessons that come out of this. One of the things I love about doing the live streams is that sometimes it's almost like a jazz gig where you kind of experiment with stuff, you know. And today was a little bit of that, kind of explaining things for guitar players that we generally don't look at this way. So. Okay. I guess I don't know. I'm kind of out of lesson for today. If you guys have questions, please let me know. Hey, if you guys are interested, I'm gonna put my link to. I did a new pedal board demo with my current new setup here. Whoops. So I'm going to put the link here for you guys to check out. I'll dump it in the video description too. You know, it's basically my, you know, Pedal Star Galactica. I wonder if I can, I don't think I can share this. But anyway, give it a watch. Check it out. It's basically me just going through all the pedals and talking about how a board with a loop switcher like that works, and I do some kind of weird things that make sense for how I like to do things. As always, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. Please give me a thumbs up on the video. All these things kind of help YouTube's algorithm say, hey, this is of interest to people and we want to share it with other people. And because you guys have been doing that, actually I've been getting a lot of traffic. It's really been helping me out, and I really do appreciate that. So for the future, I will see you guys Wednesday. I don't know what to talk about for Wednesday. There's a lot of things we could possibly do. I can always talk about comping rhythms using these chords. If you want to do the jazzier or the bluesier thing, we always talk about using these bigger chords, playing over a blues, maybe more sophisticated blues, or we just talk about other stuff. Just let me know. So, Mark, a good way to practice this, actually, you know, look for a chord chart, like a standard tune, like for this sort of thing. Like if you really want to like work on seventh chords, the best thing to do is to pick up some basic jazz standard kind of things. That song "All of Me" is a good example. "Just Friends," "A Foggy Day" is a really good workout for minor 7 flat 5 chords. And just, you know, as you take a tune like that, "Beautiful Love" is a good one. You know, and you can just Google, you know, there'll be Never Be Another You lead sheet PDF, and you'll probably find the chord chart available there online. A lot of this stuff you can do, or even like Mac the Knife or something like that. Literally, just find a chord chart, or go to the channel Learn Jazz Standards. Okay, dig this.
Hey,
No,
what's up, Brent here. I'm the Jazz
that's the wrong one. If you do these backing tracks, what's the name of this channel? Oh. Here, Learn Jazz Standards. Okay. So what is cool with this, and I'll put the link here. If you go to their, like that video, can I just share my screen here? There we go. Don't need to update video. But when you go here, if you want the chord charts for this tune, it'll literally just take you to their website. And then charts. You hit C because you're a C instrument, and there's the chord chart for you. All right, and then when you're playing along with the backing track here, oops, did I go to the wrong tune? What did I do? Anyway, but you can, you can play along with the backing track using the chord chart that they gave you and the chord voicings that we talked about in this lesson. That'd be the best way, because then you're forced to do it in real time. So, actually, if you guys want to, maybe we'll do that on Wednesday. We'll talk about comping, and we'll take some of these jazz standards and kind of work our way through it. And I can talk about more useful versions of some of these chords. So let me know, though. Okay? All right, folks, I'm going to let you roll. Thanks a lot for hanging out with me this morning, and I will see you later on in the week. And check out the guitar video.